What's going on, everybody? Kaleepus Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at the Motorola Moto G Stylus 2022 and go over what kind of value it provides and how it compares to the general phone market in 2022. Now, before we go any further, I do want to remind you to go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It helps out the channel a lot. And for your convenience, I will be linking to this phone in the video description, so be sure to check that out for the latest up-to-date info on pricing and availability, because especially with a new phone like this is going to be changing all the time. But with that being said, let's get started. So to start off, the Moto G Stylus 2022 is getting a 6.8-inch IPS LCD display with a resolution of 1080p, a PPI of 396, an aspect ratio of 20.5 by 9, and a screen-to-body ratio of about 84.6%. In addition to this, we got a 90Hz refresh rate, and this is going to make the movement on the screen a little bit faster and smoother. Now, this won't make a huge difference per se, but when you're consuming content, whether you're streaming a video, playing a game, something like that, it is going to give you a slightly nicer experience, and when you're just navigating through the phone, it's going to feel a little bit more premium. Now overall, I do think this display is really good. With the 1080p resolution, we're getting a nice crisp image. The colors are really bright and nice looking. And in general, everything is going to be great for content consumption. In addition to this, of course, this display is really large, making it good for something like reading, since things are going to be really easy to see. And with a 20:9 aspect ratio, this phone does have a taller form factor than most other phones out there. So when you're watching a video in landscape mode, things are going to look a little nicer. And then if you're reading something, you'll be able to fit more on the screen without having to scroll as much. So overall, if you want a really nice display, if you're looking for a phone for content consumption or something like that, then the Moto G Stylus 2022 is a great option. For storage, this phone is getting 128GB of internal storage with microSD card expansion, so definitely really good. For the average user, you're probably never even going to have to think about storage. And if you're a power user, if you have lots of apps, photos and videos, all that, this phone's going to be a great option for you as well. Now, to give you an idea of what the actual storage looks like on this phone, right now, I'm using 33.45GB, taking up 26% of the total space. So that's actually really good. I do have a bunch of apps on this phone and some games too. And the system itself even takes up 20GB, which is quite a bit. So as you can see, if this phone only had something like 64GB, there would definitely be a problem with storage here. So in general, if you're a power user, or even just a regular user for that matter, even if you just do basic activities with your phone, you still might want to consider getting a phone like this with more storage, because as things get larger and larger, having more storage than you think you need is getting to be more and more of a good idea. Now, there's no wireless charging with this phone, but we do have a fingerprint scanner right here on the power key. Definitely a nice spot for it. I do think it's kind of interesting to see the Moto G Stylus 2021 also had this same kind of fingerprint scanner, but then the Moto G Stylus 5G that came out 6 months later had a fingerprint scanner on the rear instead, but then they switched it back with this phone, so I'm not quite sure why they did that. But regardless, this fingerprint scanner is in a nice place because you're probably going to be touching the power button to turn on the display anyway, so why not have it unlock the phone while you're at it? This phone also has face unlock, so it's nice to see we're getting two options here to get into the phone. But real quick, I'm going to demonstrate the fingerprint scanner so you can see how it works. There we go, one more time. And there we go. So as you can see, real fast and responsive, no issues here. Now taking a look at the rear camera setup, we got a triple camera here with a 50-megapixel main camera, an 8-megapixel ultra-wide camera that actually doubles as a macro camera, and a 2-megapixel depth sensing camera for portrait mode. And in the front, of course, almost forgot to mention, we got a hole punch here for the front-facing camera. Looks real nice and clean right in the middle here. And this camera is 16 megapixels, so not bad at all. I really do like this camera setup. This phone has pretty much every feature typically available for a mid-range phone. And the ultra-wide and macro camera setup is especially interesting to see because this is the only time I've ever seen an ultra-wide camera double as a macro camera. Interesting how that works. In the grand scheme of things, it doesn't really matter since it has both features anyway. But I will say that was a little surprising to see at first. Now to give you an idea of what this camera setup can do, here are some photos taken with the main camera. As you can see, the colors are really bright and vibrant, the lighting looks really nice, the details are sharp, pretty much everything about these photos looks really good. So if you want to take lots of photos, whether it's for social media or something else, this phone is going to be a great option for that. Now here are a couple photos taken with the ultra-wide camera. Same kind of thing. These photos do look really nice. A lot of the time in mid-range phones, especially in this specific price range, usually there's a lot of distortion around the edges, but with this phone, these photos are definitely usable. So if you want to take some really nice ultra-wide photos, again, the Moto G Stylus 2022 will absolutely get the job done. Here's a photo taken with portrait mode. Again, real nice photo. Not a whole lot to say about it. The background is appropriately blurred. It's not just some abrupt thing that looks like a green screen. It actually does look like a really nice professional photo. So if you want to take portrait photos for, say, Instagram or something, I know portrait mode is really popular on social media, then this phone will get the job done. Here's a photo taken with the macro camera. Again, really nice. You can see the details really well. The picture is really sharp and the lighting and colors look good as well. So overall, this phone does have a really nice camera setup. All the cameras do work really well. So if taking photos with your phone is something you want to do often, then the Moto G Stylus 2022 is a great option for that. Now for video, it's a little less impressive here. We're capping out at 1080p in both the rear and front cameras. And the reason this is kind of a disappointment is that the Moto G Stylus 2021 actually had the ability to shoot in 4K in the rear camera. So seeing that they took that feature away with the Moto G Stylus 2022 is a little disappointing, because regardless of whether or not you would really use that feature a lot, newer phones are really supposed to have more features, not fewer. Now internally, the Moto G Stylus 2022 is getting 6GB of RAM with the MediaTek Helio G88 processor. Now it was nice to see that this phone has 2GB of RAM more than the Moto G Stylus 2021 that had 4. But with that being said, processing power wise, this was actually a little disappointing. I did run a Geekbench 5 benchmark test on this phone, and it came back with a single core score of 368 and a multi-core score of 1304, which by itself, I guess it's okay. I haven't had any performance issues, and I've been doing lots of web browsing with this phone, social media stuff. I've even played a couple games on this phone, and it's all run decently well. But the Moto G Stylus 2021 did have quite a bit more processing power than this. So despite having a little bit more RAM, it's definitely a downgrade from last year's in terms of power. Now I do recommend running this test on your current phone and comparing the scores to these, because depending on what your current device is, it could still be an upgrade. And in that case, it's not really a bad thing. I mean, again, by itself, this phone does actually perform pretty well. It's just that I was hoping for it to be at least a little bit more powerful than the Moto G Stylus 2021, but unfortunately it's less powerful, which is not the direction I want to see it moving. But again, depending on what your current device is, this phone still might be a good upgrade for you. So be sure to run that test on your phone and compare it to this one to see for yourself whether or not this phone might be an actual upgrade for you. Now for the battery, this phone is getting a 5000 mAh battery that supports 10 watt fast charging. Now while that's not the strongest fast charging in the world, in fact that's probably the minimum amount of fast charging I've seen on phones, I will tell you from experience, this phone does charge up really fast, especially if you have something like one of those really overpowered car chargers. Those are always really cool. They work really well on this phone. So definitely if your phone is dying and you're in a hurry to charge it up, this is going to work really well. Now honestly, speaking of which, that's probably not going to happen with this phone, because with a 5000 mAh battery, this phone is likely going to last multiple days without being charged. So if you need to use your phone a lot throughout the day, having a phone like this with such a large battery is definitely a good option. In addition to this, not only is a large battery like this going to give the phone a lot of life per charge, but you're also going to get lots of longevity down the road. As the battery starts to degrade, you're not going to notice it nearly as quickly as you would with a smaller battery, because you're already starting out with so much more battery life than you actually need. So if you like to get one phone and keep it for a long period of time, then this phone is going to be a great option for that. Now this phone does not have NFC, so if you really like to use Google Pay and other contactless mobile payment services, then I have bad news for you. Because unfortunately, despite most phones in this price range, I want to say, getting NFC nowadays, Motorola still hasn't put NFC in most of their phones, at least the US ones. I don't know about the other ones. But this current variant of the Moto G Stylus 2022 that I got unlocked at Best Buy doesn't have NFC, and that is a disappointment because mobile contactless payment services are getting more and more widely used, much more popular these days, so I would think that a phone like this would have it. But now that we've gone over some of the phone's specs, let's take a closer look at the actual device itself. On the left side here, we got the slot for the SIM card and the microSD card. On the bottom, we got a 3.5mm headphone jack, which by the way is an advantage this phone has over a lot of flagship phones, because most of those high-end phones don't have headphone jacks anymore. We also got a USB-C port, the microphone, the speaker, and of course the stylus. Now, in case you want to learn more about the stylus, I do have a stylus tips and tricks video where I go more in depth about its features, but suffice to say, it's a stylus. I mean, it's pretty basic. Just like every other stylus in a mid-range phone, you're not going to be able to do anything spectacular with it. So if you're planning on doing any actual art, you're probably going to be disappointed. But if you want to give it to a kid for coloring or something like that, or just take random handwritten notes, then it's actually pretty decent, I guess. But again, it's really not very sensitive. I honestly don't see a whole lot of value in it. But if you do want a phone with a stylus, maybe for more precision while navigating, something like that, then this is going to be a benefit for you. If not, another cool thing about it is you don't ever have to even touch it. You can just use this phone like a normal phone and forget the stylus is even there, and it's still going to be perfectly fine. Now on the right side, we got the power key that doubles as the fingerprint scanner. Volume down, volume up. On the top of the phone, we got the noise canceling microphone. And on the back, we got our camera setup, our flash, Motorola branding right here. Now the back has this interesting metallic finish that doesn't really show fingerprints too badly. You can still see them a little in the right lighting. But overall, I think this looks really nice. It comes in both pink and blue. Obviously, this is the pink one. But the blue one, from what I understand, looks essentially the same. Obviously, different color, but still the same kind of idea. Now overall, as you can probably see, this is a pretty large phone. It does have its advantages of having a really large display, and it's not too bulky. But keep in mind that if you have maybe smaller pockets, or you just don't really like holding a really large phone, then this might be a little bit of a drawback. But in general, I do think this phone is still pretty comfortable to hold and carry for most people. But in conclusion, is the Motorola Moto G Stylus 2022 a good phone to buy in 2022? Compared to other phones I've seen coming out in 2022 so far, I definitely think this phone is a good option. It has lots of nice features that other new phones in the same price range don't have, like for example a 1080p display. There's still plenty of phones in this price range that only have 720p displays. Also with the 90Hz thing, it's not really that uncommon anymore. I want to say most new phones have at least a 90Hz display, if not a 120Hz display, but it still does make the phone feel a little bit more premium. And the camera setup is really good. I'm definitely impressed with the pictures this phone can take. Now processing power wise, that's where things get a little questionable, because not only does this phone's predecessor, the Moto G Stylus 2021, have more processing power than this phone, but a lot of newer phones, even phones that came out in late 2021, have a lot more processing power than this. Like for example, the Samsung Galaxy A13 5G, same price range, but a lot more processing power. And I do think there are other phones that are coming out in the really near future that are going to have quite a bit more power than this as well. So if you're doing more high-end activities, or if you're going to be on your phone a lot, then this is definitely something to think about because there are better options out there. But if you want something with a really large, nice display for consuming content and stuff like that, and you're doing more basic activities on your phone, like sending text messages, making calls, browsing the web, going on social media, that kind of stuff, and you're taking lots of photos, maybe you want some nice camera features, then this phone is still going to be a great option because again, the camera setup is really good, and there are not very many phones in this price range that have a larger display, and the ones that do usually don't have this level of quality. Now, if you want to learn more about this phone, be sure to check out my tips and tricks videos for it as well, where I go more in depth about its features. And for the latest up-to-date info on pricing and availability, again, I will be linking to this phone in the video description because this is changing pretty frequently, especially with newer phones like this. But I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you found this information useful as well. If you did, don't forget to leave a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button, but I will see you in the next one.